How's it going, guys? I'm Mike, and if you catch me in game or in one of my socials, I go by Hawk. So in today's video, we are going to be covering the on-foot weapons. So this is going to be the guide for the weapons that we have currently in the game, as well as a couple that will be coming in the next update. Thankfully, I've been able to test them out because of the experimental branch, which is public, and you guys can access it now if you are currently on Steam. So we're going to go ahead and play this footage that I've captured here. So for starting off, we have the Multitool. And the Multitool is basically your starting weapon. It is a single-shot pistol. It has 14 shots in its magazine, and it fires with each pull of the trigger. The pistol is reasonably hard-hitting. It is the weakest DPS option out of all the weapons we have access to, but it has unlimited ammo. Whereas the magazine itself is 14 shots, it can be reloaded infinitely. It has an infinite pool of ammunition. Now, it is pretty precise overall, because when you aim down at sights, you can hit things in the critical weak points, which is going to be the red glowing eyes that you see on these spots, and you can hit it pretty accurately at a pretty good range. However, as you spam fire the weapon, the recoil starts to kick in, and you're going to be missing shots out of range, particularly when you're trying to hit weak points. Overall, it is a really good starting weapon. It's a good fallback, and as you always will have it in your inventory, you can't drop it. It is something that you can fall back on very easily should you run out of ammunition. As you can see in this run, it was literally the only thing I was using for this run. So the multi-tool is pretty effective. Alright, next up, we have the Sideclip. Now, the Sideclip is one of our few craftable options. We have two options that we can craft as far as weapons are concerned, is the Sideclip and the rocket launcher. Now, we can only craft the Mark 0 Sideclip as you see me using here. Now, this weapon is going to be better DPS than the multi-tool. All the weapons are. The amount of damage that this thing can put out is actually quite high, given that its rate of fire. Per shot, it's not doing a lot, but it can hit reasonably quickly at a very short period of time and do quite a bit of damage. The recoil is quite manageable, and it has a reasonable ammo reserve. Now, as you can see, this is our first weapon that I'm showcasing that has that currently is Mark 0. Now, the way that the marks were is they start at 0 and they work their way up through 1, 2, and then final at 3. What happens when you go up in mark? Higher marks do extra damage. They gain different sights. As you can see right now, I'm rolling with iron sights, but you can get things like scopes and stuff on some of these weapons, and they become more advanced as the mark goes up. On top of that, you get a greater magazine size. As you can see, the max magazine size for this at Mark 0 is 20 shots in the magazine, and that will continue to increase as the mark goes up. The DPS may or may not be drastically different on higher marks. I know with the Javelin, when you are using the marksman rifle, when you are using it, the mark is kind of irrelevant when you're playing solo, even on higher difficulties, because your breakpoints are going to be the same. Your breakpoints being at which point you're able to drop the robot. So how many shots it takes to drop it. Now, for instance, with the laser drones, with the marksman rifle, whether you're using a Mark 0 marksman rifle or a Mark 3 on difficulty 5, it's still going to take 2 shots. So ultimately, same amount of time to kill, same amount of time to drop the opponent, and same amount of ammo consumption. So the mark there, as far as damage is concerned, is mildly irrelevant. It becomes more relevant the more players you have in play, because their HP will go up. People like bigger numbers, so the higher marks can be fun. But I do know that there are people who at times prefer different marks, lower marks in fact, based upon the type of scope or iron sights that they may or may not have. So that is something to take into consideration. Next up, we have the rocket launcher. And this is the other craftable weapon. The only two craftable weapons in the game, as I said, are the Sideclip and the rocket launcher. The Sideclip can only be crafted at Mark 0. To find a higher mark, you have to find it in mission. As with most weapons, they will have to be found either at the vendors or in mission, inside crates or as loot. And so right now, the only two that we have craftable are the Sideclip and the rocket launcher. The rocket launcher here is really great for anti-ship. As you can see, it locks on, tracks, and it only takes 1 to drop most ships. Now, of course, with the Corvettes, it'll take more than 1 shot. And solo on difficulty 5, it takes 2 shots to drop a Corvette with a rocket launcher. The disadvantage to the rocket launcher is that it only gets 3 shots and it cannot be refilled. Most weapons can be refilled, and when you refill a weapon, you are refilling its ammo reserves, not its magazine. The magazine does not refill automatically when you pick up a refill. So whatever your magazine is at, it will remain there when you reload. However, when you refill, your reserves will be refilled. As you can see with the marksman rifle that I have in my equipment here, it's got a max magazine size of 6, being at Mark II, but then you'll see the ammo reserves underneath it, which is 30. So if I were to say have only 4 shots left in the magazine on this, and then I were to top off the ammo, it would not fill the magazine. The magazine would stay at 4, but the reserves would jump up to 30 as they are. That is the cap. The rocket launcher, it is also really good at dealing with heavy units. So I drop the shield on this heavy, and then I whip out the rocket launcher and I finish it. Now, the rocket launcher also does a lot of splash damage, so you have to be mindful. It's very easy to drop yourself or your friends with it. It's one of the few weapons that does have friendly fire. So if you are using it in close range, close quarters, it's kind of a bad idea. You're probably going to go down, and you're going to take out any friends with you. However, the rocket launcher is one of the most powerful weapons in the game, and it's really good, as I said, at taking out enemy ships and heavy units. It can really do a lot of damage to them. This is your other option. Now, this one you have to find as loot, but the railgun, as you can see, is doing huge amounts of damage to this spider tank, almost dropping it in 2 shots. And this is on challenge rating 4 in this clip. Now, the railgun works a little bit differently than the rocket launcher. It doesn't lock onto enemy ships, but it is still really good at doing damage to those enemy ships. It doesn't do quite as much damage as the rocket launcher, and is a little bit trickier to use. It's more skilled because it doesn't aim for you like the rocket launcher does. However, it does not have the splash damage effect and can be used at any range without risk of harming yourself. Now, as you can see, it does that charge up where the pistons here are pulling in, and there's that glow. So you have to hold the trigger, let it charge, and then once it's charged, you release it, and the shot flies out and does significant damage. The railgun has 4 shots, and like the rocket launcher, it cannot be reloaded. Once those shots are used up, the weapon is used, and you no longer have any use for it. I believe weapons that have been spent, railguns and rocket launchers have been spent, can be put in the disassembler for 1 materia, which is not much, but it's something. Otherwise, you could just drop them and move on. So that is the way that those weapons work. Next, we will talk about the marksman rifle, the Javelin, which is my personal favorite. This is your long-range sniping option. It is really good at hitting weak points. As you can see, I'm hitting weak points on these things. Even that little walker there went down in a single shot because I hit it in the weak point. Those are usually a 2-shot with a Javelin. Now, as I said, with the different marks, you get different sights. With the Javelin, it starts off with iron sights, and it gets variously upgraded scopes the further you go. So the Javelin is pretty interesting in that it is the best option for dealing with things at range. It is the most precise weapon. However, it does have a bit of a disadvantage. As you'll see here, while it is really good at dealing with these things at range and safely, this shielded opponent, it takes 2 shots to drop. Now, the reason it takes 2 shots to drop is even though it's probably doing enough damage to do all the health and all the shield will block that first shot guaranteed, and the health will take no damage at all. That means anything with the shield will always take 2 shots at least, regardless of what your artifacts are doing to power you up. If you're running Pineapple Power and you guys powered through the roof, a shielded opponent is still going to take 2 shots regardless. Other weapons that have a more rapid fire nature, such as the Halberd, can drop things in a single burst from a single pull of the trigger and move on, which means that with Pineapple Power, although the Javelin is powered up and will be more effective against things like spider tanks and stuff in that event, as you can see here, it's really good at doing that anyway. You're going to be aiming at weak points, and you can see it's just chunking its health very quickly. It only took a handful of shots to drop it about 4. But while it's more effective at doing that, when you're running Pineapple Power, it's going to still be a 2-shot on shielded opponents, which many of the opponents it's a 2-shot anyway. So the other weapons do get more of a buff from things such as Pineapple Power. Next up, we have the LMG, the Iron Belt, which is the new weapon that got added into the early access just before early access launched. And so this is your other full auto weapon, like the Sideclip. However, this one has more recoil and more damage. It also has a slightly slower rate of fire. That can make it a little bit harder to hit with, but it is pretty effective if you pulse it at range. So instead of just holding down the trigger, if you release and feather the trigger, tap it, as if it were semi-automatic, you can keep that range and keep the recoil under control pretty easily for long-range attacks. It is pretty good damage, but one thing that you're going to see me doing here is that the weapon is really good at locking down an area. It has a bit of a stun effect on anything it hits. So one thing that I oftentimes recommend for using the LMG is, rather than just targeting one thing and letting out all the fire on that one thing, spread out, move the reticle around, and hit lots of things, because you're going to be causing a stun effect, and that's going to be making it harder for things to shoot you while you're actively taking them out. So this is good at crowd control. This weapon is really good when you're being swarmed by a lot of small things, and that makes it very effective at preventing the amount of you from taking an excessive amount of damage. All right, next up we have the Maw. So the Maw is your shotgun option. The Maw spreads out very quickly, as is the case with most video games. In fact, the pellets that it fires oftentimes spread out much faster than they would with an actual shotgun in real life. They spread out very quickly, but the Maw at close range is one of your most powerful options. It can drop things very quickly, and it does a large amount of damage. Now, this is probably one of the most powerful weapons in relation to pineapple power, and the reason is that is because of the spread on the pellets. The pellets will be doing significant amounts of damage with pineapple power, but they'll also be able to hit many things multiple times. So the benefit here is that shielded opponents are going to get hit more than once, and so they're going to get dropped in a single shot. And not only are shielded units going to go down, but because of the spread, you can hit an entire swarm of small enemies and drop them all in a single shot. This is extremely effective for dealing with crowds when you have pineapple power in play. The Maw is also really useful in crowded situations, such as when you have intruders on your ship, etc. In those situations, the Maw excels especially. Now, the other nice thing about the Maw here is that up close and personal, it does a buttload of damage. It is one of your most powerful options. The downside to that is that you have to get close. Now, as you can see, I chose not to get close with this spider tank here, because it's just going to throw up a shield and block me and chuck out a bunch of grenades. So getting close to a spider tank is a bad idea, and you'll actually see that displayed later when I show you what it's like to try and melee one of these things. However, the Maw is one of those weapons that I would recommend, rather than chasing down the enemies, I'd recommend that you let them come to you. One of the problems that I see people complaining about the Maw is that they're running out in the open and trying to chase down the enemies and getting shot the entire time, and they take about a lot of damage. What you could do is sit behind cover. The enemies are going to come to you. They're not going to just let you be. They're going to chase you down, and as soon as they start to peek around the corner, blast them. And you can drop them fast enough that they're not going to do much to you. And that is one of the strategies I recommend with the Maw. Now, in this particular mission, I didn't really get a chance to do that much because I was actively the one chasing down things because I didn't have much choice. But generally speaking, I'd recommend sit behind cover and let them come to you. When you're on time constraint, it's a little bit harder to do, as this mission is, but as a general rule, that is a recommended strategy for the Maw. And next up, we've got the Halberd, which this is a personal favorite. This is only a Mark 0, so it's got the iron sights, as you can see, and as it gets upgraded, it gets nicer and nicer scopes. It also has a definite damage buff. This is one of the weapons that I think the higher marks really make a lot of sense. The Halberd does a great deal of extra damage on its higher mark variations. Mark 3, it can drop even large enemies such as spider tanks very quickly. Now, it is good at most ranges. It is not as easy to use at range as, say, the Javelin, but it is still one of your more effective options at range. It is an assault rifle that fires in bursts and does a good amount of damage. It also has a pretty good ammo pool size. The Halberd here is really good at range because it has minimal recoil, and its recoil does become more and more under control the higher the mark, as well as the damage going up. But you will be having a bit of trouble, especially on lower marks, hitting weak points at long range with this weapon due to the recoil that will be throwing off your aim as it continues to fire. However, you could spam fire this weapon. You do have, it's not something that you can just go full auto, but as fast as you can pull the trigger, pretty much it'll be firing out lead. And so this thing can put out a lot of damage, a lot of DPS very quickly. I do believe the max ammo pool here is 260. And then the magazine size, of course, continues to increase as the mark goes up. This is one of my personal favorite weapons. I find it useful at pretty much all ranges. Not as effective at long range as the Javelin, obviously, but it is very good at most ranges. It requires a bit more skill in aiming at close range than, say, the Maul, or one of the melee options that I'm about to show you. But it is quite usable at almost every range, and is just an all-around good weapon that I personally love to use. Alright. So next up, we have our melee options. So these are the new things that will be added in the update. First off, we have the Crowbar. Now this is the lighter hitting of the two options. It is the faster swinging of the two options, but it still does a really good amount of damage. The Crowbar is, as with all the melee weapons we have in the game right now, you can block, and that will reduce the amount of damage that you take. As you can see, I'm blocking here, and that makes me take 50% less damage from anything that hits me while I am blocking. And that makes it a little bit easier to approach things. Now, you may or may not see me do that here in this. As you can see, I was trying to melee spider tank there. It didn't go so well. But one of the beautiful things about melee weapons is that they tend to stun lock things. As you can see, that walker really couldn't do much while I was attacking it. Now, that doesn't apply to anything you're not attacking. You can still get shot at anything else around you, but it does hit in a pretty wide area. It can hit multiple targets, and it will stun lock them all. And it does really good damage at close range. The other cool thing is that it has a parry. If you guard, just as you take a shot from an opponent, you'll actually return that shot back onto them. Now that has to be aimed. It doesn't auto-track. You can bounce bullets back and take the opponents out using their own bullets. Kind of makes you feel like a Jedi. It's pretty cool. I love that it does that, but it is very tricky to do, and will take some skill and getting used to. Now, one of my favorite things to do with these melee weapons is to carry, say, something for range, such as a Javelin or LMG, etc., and then have the melee weapon as a backup. The melee weapons do not take any ammunition to use, and that is really can help your ammo reserves and make it a lot easier to keep from running out of ammo. Not to mention it gives you a good close range option. So if you're not running something like a Maul, a melee weapon is a really good backup to, say, a longer range weapon such as the marksman rifle. And this would give you a way to deal with things when they get really close, and where the marksman rifle is certainly not unusable but harder to use, and would also give you a way to stun lock things and prevent yourself from taking a great deal of damage. Now, one of the beautiful things that I demonstrate here with the wrench is while the wrench works very similar to the Crowbar, it hits harder and swings slower, but overall it works the same as the Crowbar currently. But both the Crowbar and the wrench work beautifully alongside the artifact that causes you to heal upon a melee kill. And I believe that artifact is called Forceful Recycling. And so Forceful Recycling will allow you to heal, and you can continue to buff. I believe the artifact can go up to level 5. But as you can see it demonstrated here, I had that artifact in play, and each time I get a melee kill, my health gets healed. So there I went from 70 HP to 100. And so by using this combination, you can actually keep yourself topped off in health by just running down enemies and bashing them, which is a great deal of fun. A little bit broken, a lot of fun. So really this is a viable option for strategies like that. Really is running into the thick of it and going crazy with the melee weapons, taking things out left and right, and you can do a buttload of damage that way. So these are the weapons that we currently have in the game. These are the options that we've got available to us. And really, they're all really fun. They all fill their own specific niche. I'm sure we're going to get more as time progresses. Hey guys, okay, just popping in with a break in this video to do a quick edit. As I was exporting this video to send it to you guys, The devs popped in with an update on their Discord and let us know that, hey, there is a new update for the experimental branch, and they are adding a new melee weapon. It is called the Heat Blade. Unfortunately, I have no footage of the Heat Blade. I have spent the last couple of hours trying to find one in the experimental branch, and I have been sadly unsuccessful. So, I have no idea what it looks like. I have no idea what it does. Assumption that I can give is that it was probably what the parry system was intended for, and it seems that the parry system is still in play for the crowbar and the wrench currently at this time. That's really all I know. As soon as I find one and I can capture some footage of it, I will probably throw up a short and just give you guys an update on what it looks like and what it's capable of. But yeah, that's all I know at this time. Anyway, back to the video. And as I said, with the higher marks, they do more damage, but one thing that I've seen a trend of is that people make out as though the lower mark weapons are useless. Friends, the lower marked weapons are far from useless. They are still going to be higher DPS than your multi-tool. As you were seeing with the Halberd here, it's still doing a good amount of damage. It's still very useful. See, it's dropping things very quickly. Even these Mark 0 weapons are still extremely effective. Yes, the scopes are not quite as nice, and although some people do prefer the iron sights to the scopes themselves, they're still very useful. They're still very capable weapons. And so really, I'm personally of the opinion, I don't care what I pick up. Well, with the Javelins, I do prefer a scope, which means I want a Mark 1 or higher. Generally speaking, I'm not overly worried about the mark of my weapon. I find that that is less of a concern than having something that is useful and that suits my tastes. At any rate, guys, I hope that this is helpful to you. I hope that you're all having a great one, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.